Hi there. So, today we're doing John chapter 11. If you remember last time, he stayed it for a while. He went beyond Jordan River near a place where John was first baptizing. He stayed there for a while, and many followed him. John didn't perform miraculous signs, they remarked to one another, but everything he said about this man has come true. We're talking about John the Baptist, who is Jesus, a cousin to Jesus. And in chapter 10, he talked a lot about him being the shepherd, and used it a lot. And this is an important one. He said to us, I have other sheep too that are not in the sheepfold. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock with one shepherd. I like to hear that kind of stuff. And these people are already saying, how are you going to keep suspense? If you're the Messiah, tell us plainly. And he says, I've already told you, and you didn't believe me. The proof is the work I do in my Father's name. I highlighted this. But you don't believe me because you're not my sheep. My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one can snatch them away from me. For my Father has given them to me, and he is more powerful than anyone else. No one can snatch them from the Father's hand. The Father and I are one. He's saying that he's God, and that people that are strictly only by rules and only by books and never by feelings, really makes him mad when he talks like that, because the scrolls say nobody's supposed to say those things except the Messiah, and they don't read that part. Well, and then they went to stone him, And he goes, at my Father's direction I have done many good works. For which of these are you stoning me? We're not stoning you for good works, we're stoning you for blasphemy. Jesus replied, it is written in your own scriptures that God said to certain leaders of the people, I say you are gods. And he was talking about judges. A judge, even today, a judge has supreme, decisions over the life and death of another human being. A judge is the only one that does that, besides juries, but a judge decides ultimately the life and death of a human being. So they are like gods, but they will be judged too. However you judge, you will be judged. That includes judges. So anyways, let's get on to John 11. This is the raising of Lazarus. Now Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they were two sisters and a brother that lived in a nice home in Judea outside of Jerusalem. And they must have been friends for a long time, because she knew things that Jesus had been teaching, but they weren't following him around all the time. But the way they talk, they must have spent a long time together. They were good friends and maybe even grew up together. But why not? A man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. Your dear friend. So they were very close. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so the Son of Man will receive glory from this. So although Jesus loved Martha, Mary, and Lazarus, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But his disciples objected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago, the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? Jesus replied, there are 12 hours of daylight every day, which tells you that they live around the equator. On the equator, there's 12 hours a day and 12 hours a night. It's just an interesting point. There's 12 hours a day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. But at night, there is danger of stumbling because they have no light. Then he said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I will go and wake him up. The disciples said, Lord, if he is sleeping, he will soon get better. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus as simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and for your sakes I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Come, let's go see him. Thomas, nicknamed the twin, doubting Thomas we call him, said to his fellow disciples, "Let's go too and die with Jesus." See, they were blindly following him at the time. Like I blindly followed Jesus. I don't question any of his motives. He thought if they were going to go back, if they went back to Judea, they would get stoned and be killed. And at this time, he was ready to die with Jesus. So he said, "Let's go too and die with Jesus." When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. So they must have been doing very well, And, it's possible they had the upper room, or some people said the rich man who went away sad because Jesus said, "Sell everything and follow me." I think Jesus and him were very close because it says it's one of the few people in the Bible that talked about where it said, "And Jesus loved him," because he had always followed the ways, but he had a lot of money. I think he might have had the upper room, or Lazarus had the upper room. But there was an upper room when all this went down that they stayed in for a long time and hid out there. But we may never know. Anyway, Thomas says, "Let's go die with Jesus." He'd been in the grave for 4 days, a few miles down the road from Jerusalem. Yeah, many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary at their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus told her, "Your brother will rise again." "Yes," Martha said, "he will rise with when everyone else rises on the last day." Now see, the fact that Mary said this tells you, we'll make that blue, that he has told these 3 siblings earlier about the plan and about him coming back and about everybody being risen at the last day. They knew all this already, which tells me they had spent some time with Jesus. Probably a long time. It was just them. So that's interesting. So Martha said, "He will rise." Excuse me. "He'll rise with everyone on the last. Rises on the last day." Jesus told her, this is a famous verse, "I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live, even after dying. Anyone who lives in me and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this, Martha? Now that verse there, I highlighted it. Back in the 70s when I was a teenager, in the 70s, a long time ago, we used to sing songs about this verse, "I'm the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me, even after dying, will live forever." And that's a good verse for preteens. We used to a lot sing the songs. Maranatha had a bunch of songs about it, and there were choruses all around that verse. That just brings back memories. It's cool. Anyway, "Do you believe this, Martha?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I have always believed you are the Messiah. I have always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. I have always believed." So, dear friends, best friend Lazarus, your dear friend Lazarus, says that he loved them. He was very close to this family. And they knew a lot. A lot. Then she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, "The teacher is here and he wants to see you." So immediately Mary went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village at the place where Martha met him. When the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep, so they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. And Mary was the younger girl, the kind of youngest sibling that probably gets more attention. When Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him. What's this? Let's see. He was angry in his spirit, it says. Yeah, a deep anger welled up within him. He was deeply troubled. Well, it doesn't say why he was deeply troubled, but a lot of deaths back then were just fanfare and rigmarole, and they hired professional weepers to cry, and they didn't have newspapers or internet and stuff back then, TV, so they hired people to shout and scream and cry out loud and let everybody know that somebody's died. So, and the whole media thing, probably made him a little angry in his spirit. And he was deep. So he asked Mary, "Where have you put him?" They told him, "Lord, come and see." Then Jesus, "Come and see." Then Jesus wept. The shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. And it says he wept. It doesn't say he cried. It doesn't say he was sad and tears rolled down. It says he wept, which means he wept and cried out loud. Was he weeping for Lazarus? I don't think so. He was about to raise Lazarus from the dead, and he knew what he was doing. But as God does now, God has cried with people who are sad. Even if God knows he's going to heal you, he will cry with you. Your own sadness, will bring him to tears. When your children are hurting, your own kids, are in the hospital, and God forbid something's horrible's happening to them, you're overwhelmed with sadness. God will console you and cry you. I have felt God's tears on my cheek and running down my neck when I was at some of my worst times at night in life. So, yes, we're made in his image. We cry, God cries too. So Jesus wept. And I think he was weeping at the situation. The people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him." But some said, "This man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb. A cave with a stone rolled across the entrance. "Roll the stone aside," Jesus told him. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, "Lord, he's been dead for 4 days. The smell will be terrible." They didn't, back then they didn't embalming. They weren't like the Egyptians and did the stuff. They washed him, anointed him with oils and fragrances, and then wrapped him up in cloth and put him in a tomb. So yeah, he's gonna smell. Jesus responded, "Didn't I tell you that you would see God's glory if you believe?" So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up in heaven and said, "Father, thank you for hearing me. You will always hear me. But I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so they will believe you sent me." Then Jesus shouted, "Lazarus, come out!" And the dead man came out. His hands and feet were bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth. Jesus told him, "Unwrap him and let him go." And some of the other Gospels, they talk about he was hungry, feed him, and after 4 days, yeah, you're going to be hungry, thirsty, But John seems to be a guy that, like, bullets, he just tells you the bullets. But, okay, and because of this, and, a lot of people saw this, there were a lot of people around. Many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. But some went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Gossips, the town has always got gossips in it. And they do that to beef themselves up. Look what I did. Ha, ha, ha. Just picture suspenders. Some went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the leading priests and Pharisees called the high council together. Let's see, click on that. The high council. I don't know what I was reading. 48. Yeah. Oh, 47. The Sanhedrin. Yeah. I kind of knew that. But they called the high council together. What are we going to do? They asked each other. This man certainly performs many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. Then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. So, this is important. And this draws a very close parallel to where a lot of governments are today. If we allow him to go on like this, everyone will believe in him. Then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. You have to understand the government at the time. The Romans were the supreme world rulers at the time, and there was a lot of well, they weren't Jews back then, but there were a lot of Hebrew people, and it was more people than the Romans didn't want to put in the manpower and the governors to control, because there's millions of them. They don't want to control millions of people that way, so they left the Pharisees and the Sanhedrin. They left that under government to control the people, to control their own people. And it was known that you will control your people. If you lose control of your people, we're going to come in and wipe you out. And we'll control your people. The Romans will control the people. So there's a deep state and it's a deep state, just like now. A lot of countries now have their own little governments and their own little stuff, but they answer to a much larger power. Whether it be the United Nations or NATO or the World Economic Forum or the World Health Organization, they answer to somebody else. And if they don't toe the line, control their people, and do the right thing, Australia is one example. Australia is part of the UK, the United Kingdom. And if they don't like what to do in the United Kingdom, ergo kings and queens and Charles and all those people, will come down and they'll just get rid of their government and put a new one in there. And this was the same way back then. So the Sanhedrin, and the Pharisees were afraid of their way of life. And they had big houses and lived in churches with columns and wore fine clothes and ate the best food. And, kind of like Congress, very much like Congress. You let them get away with too much. And they were afraid of losing that. Okay. The Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. And everybody answers to somebody. So they answer to the Romans. A lot of our government today answers to somebody else other than the people, which is obvious because some of them just don't seem to care about the people which they're supposed to be representing. But anyways, that's what they're afraid of. So Caiaphas, who was a high priest at the time, said, "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't realize that it is better for you that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed." And this is the highest guy there. Speaker of the House, if you will. He did not say this on his own. As high priest at the time, he was led to prophesy that Jesus would die for the entire nation. Not only for that nation, but to bring together and unite all the children of God scattered around the world. So from that time on, the Jewish leaders began to plot Jesus' death. As a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry among the people and left Jerusalem. He went to a place near the wilderness, to the village of Ephraim, and stayed there with his disciples. It was now almost time for the Jewish Passover celebration, and many people from all over the country arrived in Jerusalem several days early so they could go through the purification ceremony before Passover began. They kept looking for Jesus, but as they stood around the temple, they said to each other, "What do you think? He won't come for Passover, will he?" Meanwhile, the leading priests and Pharisees had quickly ordered that anyone seeing Jesus must report it immediately so they could arrest him. Sounds like a lot of stuff going on today, huh? Weird. Well, that's... we'll get into chapter 12 next time. Lots of stuff happening. Have a good day. God bless. Keep reading.